Aloha mai kako, and mahalo for joining us. My name is Melodie Aduja, newly elected Democratic National Convention delegate. I serve as Region 9 Chair of the Oahu County Democrats. Region 9 includes districts 48 through 51, and with me also, which is Waimanalo to Waihole. And with me also is Flora Obayashi. She's the Vice President of House District 48, Precinct 1, and former Kahaluu Neighborhood Board Chair for 8 years. She will also be moderating. Also assisting is Joe Francher, and he's going to be our technical support, our meeting host, and timekeeper. Tonight we will hear from District 51 candidates representing Kailua and Waimanalo. They are Alan Akao, Coby Chock, Scott Grimmer, and Lisa Marten, 4 outstanding Democrats. They're vying for the seat currently held by Judiciary Chair Chris Lee. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to give their opening statements, which includes their top 3 legislative priorities, and then they will answer 10 questions within or 11 questions within 2 minutes each, and each candidate will have their closing statements of 2 minutes. We will end with some information on the August 8th primary election by mail-in ballot. So without further ado, let's get started with the opening statements, and the order will be Alan, Coby, Scott, and Lisa, and you have 3 minutes each. And let's go ahead and start with Alan Akao.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you for your time, your attention this evening. My name is Alan Akao. I'm running for the State House of Representatives, District 51, because I bring passion as well as experience. And I understand that this is going to be a really critical time in our community, looking for a new leader to fill the gap with Representative Lee moving towards the Senate. I'm currently a deputy public defender, so I know and am a public servant. I want to continue to serve in an expanded capacity at the state capitol. I also bring legislative experience, as I previously served as the office manager and chief of staff for State Representative Kaniela Ing. I also bring community background. I currently serve on the Kailua Neighborhood Board. I'm also a member of the Prince Kuhio Hawaiian Civic Club, as well as on several educational and school boards. I really want to bring a commitment to good government, to increasing education and opportunity. And I also want to bring a strong sense of justice, but not just criminal justice based on my experience in that sector, but environmental justice. And while there may be a lot of things for me to learn in that area, one thing I want to bring to the table is equity, making sure that environmental projects, energy projects are equitable in the distribution, instead of consistently being in communities that are considered low income or exploited by big corporations. So I want to make sure that, we're being fair, not just in our justice system, criminal justice law, but in all areas, right? I want to bring a perspective that is fresh and innovative, but also has the backup of my experience practicing law and being a community member and a community board member, as well as someone that's worked in the legislature, so I can serve on day one and not really have to figure things out on the job, but based upon knowing the way in which the legislature works and the way in which the caucus works. So mahalo to the Democratic Party, mahalo to Scott, Coby, and Lisa for taking the time to speak with all of us. And I always say that a strong democracy is based upon having options and having diversity of opinion, because I believe diversity is a strength. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Alan. At this time, we'd like to hear from Coby Chock.
Hello, everyone. I'm Coby Chock, and I'm running for the State House of Representatives in Kailua and Waimanalo. Really to ensure that we have creative, effective solutions for the well-being of our state. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you, Melodie and Flora, for moderating this event and really putting it all together for us. And also thank you to the other candidates and everyone out there who just came to really hear out all the different candidates and make a difference just on everyone doing their part to serve our district and serve our community. My service to the people of Hawaii follows these 3 immediate priorities. First, I seek to address the economic and social impacts of COVID-19 in the islands. I'll do this by utilizing the funds from the CARES Act to protect jobs, to support small businesses, and assist vital services that are necessary to maintaining the health of our state. Additionally, I will voice my support for the HEROES Act to our senators so that Hawaii can receive further funds from Congress that will allow us to continue to have economic and health security in the islands. Secondly, I will tackle the long-standing issues of affordable housing in Hawaii. The cost of living has placed an enormous burden on our families, and this has only been compounded by COVID-19 and it exaggerates homelessness, where the people in our communities have no place to go but the streets. I'll undertake these problems at its core by rethinking how we're going to do this. How are we going to promote affordable housing and ease the economic burden on our families, and really address the issue of homelessness in the islands. Lastly, I will protect and conserve our environment. In the face of climate change, damage to our reefs, and overdevelopment in Hawaii, I'm a strong believer in Malama Aina, in which I believe if we take care of the land will take care of us. I seek to rapidly address the issues surrounding fossil fuels in the islands by supporting the clean, renewable energy initiative that Chris Lee set forth to have Hawaii on 100% renewable energy by 2045. And in this battle of overdevelopment, we'll be keeping Kailua and keeping Waimanalo country, thereby preserving the intrinsic beauty of our island. We have seen the devastating impact of these issues across the island, and this is why I'm running, because I don't want to see more of my friends, more of my family members moving away from here. I want to make sure that we have a future here that supports our working class families and allows future generations of local people to live in the place we call home. Hawaii has a history of electing young Democrats into political office, understanding that as a democracy, there's value in having diverse representation in government. As seen with Chris Lee and Tulsi Gabbard, this progressive
15
mindset
seconds.
has allowed for massive influential change in Hawaii for the better. It is my intention to take on this mantle that Chris Lee has created to continue to serve this district for all. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Coby. And at this time, we'd like to hear from Scott Grimmer.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Scott Grimmer. I'm running to get Hawaii back to work, to lower the cost of living in Hawaii, and to keep our district the best place in the world to raise a family. The coronavirus crisis has laid bare the failings of an economic system based entirely on tourism, but it has also offered new industries and new jobs that Hawaii can be at the forefront of. I'm a businessman. After law school, I started an online travel company, which I sold last year. My company created the kinds of 21st century jobs that Hawaii needs to create. Let's look at Hawaii's strengths from a business perspective. We have year-round good weather. We're part of the trusted American legal and regulatory systems, and we're in a unique time zone. What industries does that give us a comparative advantage in? Well, telework, finance, agriculture, and renewable energy. Several of these we're going to talk about tonight, so I'll just highlight telework for now. My sister's a substance abuse counselor in Kaneohe, and since the shutdown, she's done much of the counseling on Zoom. It isn't just counseling. Law, sales, medicine, teaching, insurance, computer programming, they're all going on Zoom. That means we can attract these jobs to Hawaii. People can live here and be part of our community, but work online in high-paying, recession-proof jobs. We can change the acronym WFH from work from home to work from Hawaii. A lot of these jobs require American staffing 24/7. That's where our unique time zone comes in. People in Hawaii can cover the East Coast overnight shifts during our evenings. My business experience gives me a lot of ideas for getting Hawaii back to work. And we need to do that first because we can't afford any of our other priorities until we get the economy and tax collection going again. Second, we need to lower the cost of living, especially housing in Hawaii. I'm 32 years old. It saddens me to see the people I grew up with here having to leave Hawaii because they can't afford the cost of housing. Housing in Hawaii consumes a bigger percentage of workers' paychecks than anywhere else in the country. We can do better. We can use federal tax credits to build more affordable housing. We can build on state land to get more affordable housing. We can fully fund the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to get more affordable housing. I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race who supports the affordable housing project being proposed in Kailua, because projects like that will make it affordable for local families to stay in our community. Third, we need to keep Kailua and Waimanalo the best place in the world to raise a family. To do that, We need to invest in public education and protect the environment. I'm a third generation Hawaii resident. I want my kids to be the fourth generation so that they can run around barefoot from one family's pool to the park to the beach and get back home just in time for dinner like I did growing up. For the next generation to do that, we need to solve our teacher shortage and protect the environment. Hawaii is
15 seconds.
teachers short. Hawaii is 1,000 teachers short. We know that people who grew up here are more likely to stay longer as teachers than people from the mainland. So let's end the teacher shortage by offering free college to local kids who commit to teaching in our public schools for 5 years. And without a clean environment, we have nothing. So a vote for Scott Grimmer will always be a vote to protect the environment.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. At this time, I'd like to hear from Lisa Marten.
Hi, my name is Lisa Marten, and I am running to represent you. I just want to give you a little background on myself. I am a Kailua girl. I went to Kailua Intermediate and Kalaheo High School. After that, I went to the mainland, to California and Japan for college. And then I went to work and back to graduate school to get a degree at Harvard in public policy, to work again, and then back to school to get a doctorate in public health. So I have worked a little bit in Asia and Latin America with some of the poorest of the poor populations. But when I had my children, I have 2 sons that are now in college, I came back to Hawaii, came back home to raise them here in the best place on earth where I was also raised. And my background, my passion has always been helping the poor. And in my work, I developed a particular interest in health, and that's why I specialized in public health. That are not familiar with it is really the science of using data and information to make decisions. And we look at health as a big picture. It includes housing, it includes poverty, it includes access to medical care, it includes food. And so I kind of take that perspective. I worked at the medical school here in Hawaii at the Center on HIV/AIDS for many years. And then 5 years ago, I left and I started a nonprofit because I was very worried about climate change. And I felt that climate change was really going to be the biggest public health problem of our day. So I started the nonprofit, and we do mostly education in schools on climate change, including developing curriculum for elementary, middle, and high school science curriculum. We have a project on the watershed of Hamakua Marsh where we've been planting a native forest. And I have done a lot of lobbying, working with the legislature. Another thing I've been involved with the last few years is I was a founding board member of Trees for Honolulu's Future, which is a nonprofit that is focused on expanding the urban canopy here across all of Oahu. The 3 issues that it's hard to do just 3, but 3 issues that are very important to me. One is environmental protection. That is something that I obviously have been working on full time for the last 5 years. It's not just something that I say I'd like to start doing once I'm elected. Another thing is protecting our community, which is something, again, that I've been involved with for more than a decade. I have been fighting to protect our
15
zoning,
seconds.
to maintain the quality of our communities, protect ourselves from over-tourism. And for that, I have worked with the legislature, with the city council, and then the last thing is schools, to fund our teachers, to let the kids have the education they deserve. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Flora?
Thank you very much. I'd like to, because we just experienced some lag and some technical issues, I'd like to ask everyone to mute themselves so that we can give full power to our candidates. So question number 1 is, state officials took action to flatten the curve on the pandemic deaths by restricting tourism, shutting down schools and businesses, restricting large gatherings, which has compromised the state's economic health. In May, the legislature added $1.3 billion to the rainy day fund. And as a state legislator, how would you allocate the funds to rescue the economy. You know, we're facing an $800 million shortfall because of the unemployment insurance. So the question will, in order, will be Coby, Scott, Lisa, Alan. We'll start with you, Coby.
Flora, 1 minute, 1 second. Flora,
Yes,
how much time are you giving for an answer? Is it 2 minutes or 1 minute?
2 minutes.
2
2
minutes.
minutes each.
Thank you.
Coby?
Good. Okay. So first and foremost, we need to use this money that we got from the CARES Act that's currently in the rainy day fund to make sure we can continue to pay the unemployment claims for our struggling working class families and really create more accessible loans available to our small businesses who may have not been able to get the other PPP loans that the federal government put out, really to just make sure they're not forced to close and lay off more employees. That being said, $1.3 billion only breaks down to about $915.49 per capita, which is really not enough to rescue an economy the way that we would like to see it happen, but it can sustain it. And I think the biggest step we can take to really overcome the economic difficulties and the short run we're experiencing now is by taking more steps to reopen our tourism economy. While it's nice to diversify, and I think we really need to, currently we just need more money coming into the state. And this will naturally bring more money into the state. With the current 14-day mandatory quarantine, the only people who are visiting us or arriving are those with family here that they can stay with for an extended period of time, and the few tourists who come with the intention of breaking quarantine anyway. Really, if we want the mandatory quarantine to not sway so many people away from coming here, we need to reduce it to 1 day. So more tourists would come, giving us, really they'll be giving up 1 day of their trip to experience paradise, which is I think really doable for a lot of people who would consider visiting here again. Really to do this safely, we need to make sure that we use the latest testing methods to pre-test before departure, test upon arrival, and mandate a 1 day quarantine, which is a lot shorter than the 14-day quarantine. And this would allow the rapid COVID-19 test to determine if the visitor has the virus. And this test is being used in Texas, and it's a simple saliva test. It's not 100% perfect, but it would be a huge step forward in reopening our economy, getting more money here while also keeping people with the virus out. This would not be would be a complete travel ban is the only way to completely stop this. However, we can't afford that anymore. We need people back to work, and we still need to take our proper precautions with PPE and all of the social distancing. But by reopening and just having a 1 day quarantine, it would entice a lot more people to come here rather than solely working with a mere $1.3 billion in rainy day funds. Thank you guys.
The next person is Scott.
I would use the $1.3 billion for housing, food, and healthcare. First, I want to say the legislature let us down by putting that money into the rainy day fund and then taking a 3-week recess. Why do we have a rainy day fund if not for times like right now? It's not just raining. We're in the middle of a downpour, and our legislators took a vacation. Our communities need this money, and they need it yesterday. So first, I would go with housing. We need to keep people from falling into houselessness. Everyone knows how big of an issue houselessness is in our district. And in the short and medium term, we do need to address the people who are currently houseless. But more important than that right now is keeping new people from falling into houselessness, from experiencing that trauma and maybe falling into a situation that they can't get out of. So we need to earmark some of that money for charities like the Aloha United Way, which can pay people's rent on a short-term basis while they're laid off. Second, we need to distribute food. So the state's done an okay job at this. We've had 16 food distributions, distributed a little more than 1 million pounds of food at about $1 per pound. So it's a really cost-effective way to make sure people are getting through the day, especially families with kids who normally get their meals for free at school, but schools are closed. So we need to increase our food distribution a lot. And last, healthcare. Right now, testing needs to be free. If people need hospital stays because they have COVID, it needs to be free. We can't let the COVID-19 crisis send more people into medical debt or medical bankruptcy. And we can't let people be afraid to go get a test because they don't have the money. This is a public health crisis. Anyone who gets COVID can pass it on to anyone else. So we need to make sure that everyone for free.
15 seconds.
If we make sure that everyone for free can go get tested, we can beat this more quickly.
Thank you very much, Scott. Next is Lisa.
Okay, so basically, we're going to be spending a lot of money, and we have a chance to use this transition in our recovery to change the way our economy works. So for example, we can lift up women by making sure some of those, the aid and is directed towards women-owned businesses and industries with high proportions of women in it. We can also start to reduce our dependency on tourism, which is not to say to get rid of tourism, but just to diversify. Again, where do we invest those funds? So two promising areas are local renewable energy, which is something I've fought for a long time, and local food production, because these are two things that we spend money on anyways. We already spend money on them. If we spend that money and keep it here in Hawaii, keep that money at home, it will help us. There's actually a lot of green jobs already identified that are ready to go. And if we invest in basically providing the salaries for those jobs, we can get a lot of things accomplished at the same time as our recovery, right? Restore natural resources, restore farmland, make ourselves more resilient to climate change. We want to get our shovel-ready construction jobs going. I am not torn between paying public workers and helping small business, nonprofits, and unemployed individuals. I think we need to do it all. We do have access to borrow funds. Hawaii has excellent, the best credit rating. And we may do better on the open market, but there's also available. And this is what we need to do so we don't have to make a choice between our teachers, the people who actually process our unemployment claims, and the people that need it. So we do need to just continue we need to fund our unemployment beyond July and help with housing. I think I saw the figure over 30% of adults missed a rent or mortgage payment last month. So these are things we need to work on and use that fund and borrow if we need to stimulate our economy, or we will have a worse, longer recession to get our way out of.
Thank you, Lisa. Alan.
Thank you. Addressing your question, when the federal government gave CARES Act money to the state, it said to do two things: spend it on COVID relief and do it before the end of the year. And our legislature has failed us because they've decided that number two, waiting and the timeline that they have, is more important than number one, which is COVID relief. That's what that money is for. We're not talking about how we're going to invest it in future economies. What we need is stabilization right now, and stabilization in the areas that are in most need. That's providing food, that's providing wages and unemployment benefits. So we need to strengthen our unemployment benefit backlog, get that taken care of, get those funds out, make sure it's replenished so that if people need that money, and we know they do, that money is available for them. Second, expanding SNAP, or giving money to the Department of Education, who's extended their to-go food pickup for families who can provide meals for their children. We need to expand those programs so that families aren't worried about what food is going to be eaten by their children on a day-to-day basis. And the third thing is going to be making sure that that money goes to either grants or loans at low to no interest to our working class businesses, right? Not to big corporations that qualify for the PPP loans. And we've seen that large corporations and small businesses are competing for that same pool. So we really need to make sure that if the state is not providing that available funds to our small businesses, and they're fighting out with large corporations for a small piece of the pie, there's been reports that 20 to 25% of our small businesses are going to go out of business by the end of the year. And again, our legislators are waiting to see just how much struggle we can afford. And we've already struggled too much. So that's what we need to do with that rainy day fund money. And we need to do it now.
Mahalo. Melodie?
Okay, this question relates to COVID-19 social impacts. Other states have reopened earlier and are now experiencing spikes in infection rates and rapidly rising pandemic deaths. Although Hawaii's infection and death rates are relatively lower, there remains a 25% unemployment rate and long lines at food bank distribution points. As Hawaii begins to reopen for business and workers return to their jobs, do you think the government is doing all that it can to help or to keep the people safe? Okay, the order of the answers will be Scott, Lisa, Alan, and Coby. So at this time, Scott, you have the floor.
The government has not done enough to keep us safe during this pandemic. We're lucky that we have warm weather, sunshine, and isolation, because those are the things that have saved us from our leadership's failings. Now, this problem started way before the pandemic. You don't build your house on stilts after a tsunami. You do it before the tsunami. There was no preparation for this pandemic at the state level or the local level. There was no stockpile of PPE. There was no plan in place. I mean, to use one example that's not related exactly to safety, there was no investment in the unemployment office in case of a surge in unemployment. After this pandemic, our priority needs to be better preparedness for the next time. We need to start stockpiling PPE. We need to start stockpiling medical supplies. But during this pandemic, what can the government do going forward to keep us safe as we reopen the economy? I think there's two things. They can provide PPE and cleaning sprays to small businesses. There are a lot of small businesses that can't open right now because they don't have that PPE and those cleaning supplies. And if those small businesses can't open, the economy can't reopen. The tax collections can't pick back up, and we can't afford any of our priorities. And the other thing that they can do is better quarantine enforcement. I mean, we're having cult leaders fly here and flout our quarantines. We're having Instagram models fly here and flout our quarantines. The quarantine process of a single phone call per day, it's not working. We need to enforce the quarantine. That will keep us safe. Our current leaders have failed to keep us safe, which is their #1 job. It's time for new leaders.
Okay, thank you very much. Lisa?
Thank you. So I just do want to appreciate our leaders for giving us the lowest death rates in the country and lowest infection rates in the country. They have definitely saved us from a horrible experience that people have had in other places. But yes, of course, we can do better. We can always do more. I have a doctorate in public health, as I mentioned, and I'm big on evidence-based decisions. We have great data. We can use it better. We should have closed our borders a little earlier, then we might have been able to keep our schools and our local economy open because we knew there was limited hospital capacity and we had no treatment experience. By May, we had flattened the curve, and at that point, based on the data, we should have started opening up. Now we are opening up and we have much better tests and we have much better testing capacity. For example, Dr. Scott Miskovich, who's been doing a lot of testing around Hawaii, he has a machine that turns around swab tests in 15 minutes. So we need to test more and collect more evidence. And the sad thing that just happened is we have these outbreaks in our nursing homes. They have very good protocols in place. They've been following since the beginning. But we can't wait for symptomatic cases. We need to do more testing, to do surveillance. So it can be very costly, but there's ways around it. You can do batch testing where you test an entire group together, and then if it's negative, if it's positive, then you can test individuals. You're much less likely to have false negatives when you do that, because in a group, more than one person is likely to be positive. Another thing you can do is just
15 seconds.
examples of surveillance. So that's something we can do. And when they find something in any long-term care facility or jail or other high-risk group, then what we can do is go in with a crack team to do testing, training, and if there is a lot of infection among the staff, actually, if they need to be quarantined, we can replace that staff. So we can basically work on our hotspots much better than we are by using the tools that are available to us now with testing.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Now at this time, let's hear from Alan Akao.
Thank you. To answer the question, our leaders haven't been doing the best job. And I understand that it's tough and that, this is very unexpected. So it's not that they should shoulder the blame alone, because once the reasonable protocols were put in place, it's really on the community. And we've seen some great efforts by the community to address this. There's just an article that Waimanalo, which is part of our district, has 0 confirmed cases. And part of that is the community rallying to make sure that we protect ourselves, right? Once we have guidance, do that ourselves. But what we've seen is that the government has pushed the burden mostly onto the people and to the businesses to self-regulate. And I've seen it at the courts, at restaurants, at stores, where they put a sign and say, please don't come in unless you're wearing a mask. And if you have symptoms, please don't enter. That doesn't give me any confidence that every person is going to follow those guidelines and volunteer themselves to be experts and hold themselves accountable. So we have to do that. I think the best thing that we can do right now is increase funding for contact tracing. We got to know where these infections are. How can we track it and get good data, like Lisa said? But we also need to make sure that we have a long-term plan. And we've seen some miscommunications between state and county government. And we really need to be on the same page, because it is a public health care crisis. So we can't have any more division. Really, in addressing this, there needs to be unity. They want to fight about the budget and they want to fight about politics, they can do that, but public health should come first. So I think we really have to have some strong protocols in place, stronger than what we've had. As talked about earlier, quarantine enforcement. I work in the criminal justice system. Quarantine and stay-at-home orders were violated frequently. More than that was reported on the news, but we've seen it. And another thing we really, really need to pay attention to is maximum capacity. I think that's one of the things that's really going to help us. Is we need to get businesses open, but we really have to have them adhere to maximum capacity reductions. We cannot have hundreds of people at large events. We even have to make sure restaurants, hey, we want you open. We want you guys to be able to handle cleaning and the safe care guidelines.
10 seconds.
But we can't do that if we have maximum capacity pre-COVID. So those are the things I think we need to address right away.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's hear from Coby Chock.
So, I believe that the state leaders are doing their best to address the unprecedented situation with continued PPE requirements and crowd limitations in place. It's easy for us or for anyone to say, oh, they should have done this, oh, they should have done that. Because the reality is we haven't experienced anything like this for about over 100 years. Nothing to this magnitude. And this doesn't come up frequently where we can say, oh, yes, it's going to happen exactly at this time period. So, I'd like to thank the leaders who have been actively playing a role in their community and making sure we can take care of this at every level, in the community level to the state level, county level. But that being said, that doesn't mean that that's the best thing we could do. Although what we have done to shut down our borders, to limit things, it did protect our kupuna and flatten the curve to make sure our state's medical infrastructure could keep up with the ill effects of this pandemic. Furthermore, we even have the fewest cases in the nation. That being said, contact tracing is one of the best things we can do, but we need to allocate more money of the budget, and that can be potentially from the COVID relief and the rainy day fund as well, that we could use that funds to continue to find more people that we could use to contact trace this back and make sure we can kind of take it out of the population here in Hawaii, so that we don't have too many people that we don't know about spreading this. And aside from what we have going on now, it's also important to look forward and see what we need to do and what we need to prepare for the future. Across the nation, we're going down in terms of the number of cases in general. And at this time, I think it's important that our government not only looks at what we have now, but also looks at what happens if another wave comes in the fall. Making sure that we can stockpile more PPE, sanitation wipes, other sanitation supplies, and basic consumer goods such as paper towels, toilet paper, in case there's a second wave in the fall. I think that's what we should be doing now in preparation for in the fall and next year as well.
Mahalo. The next question is on the subject of homelessness. The state's first Kauhali village of 11 100 square feet homes was built in Waimanalo for families previously living in cars or out in the open. The project was entirely financed by donations, and the land is held by a DLNR leaseholder. What strategies would you employ or have in mind to tackle homelessness in the district and the state? The order of the speakers will be Lisa, Alan, Coby, and Scott. Lisa, take it away.
Okay. I'm glad you guys included that project. It's a great project. Auntie Blanche is inspiring. Not only did she get people into housing and off the streets during COVID, but she keeps the food coming. She's connected with social services, including getting everybody IDs, everybody counted in the census, and they have a mailbox so that they can get their ballots to vote. I've tried to support her, and every time I go there, I was just there today actually, they've made progress. They're always making progress. But the truth is that we can't expect Auntie Blanche to solve our state homeless problems, right? This is a role for this. It hasn't been easy. It's actually not a permanent settlement. It's only temporary during COVID. There's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done because it's in a flood zone. It's not the right zoning. So we're trying to get the right paperwork in order. But for future projects, you know, if elected, I would definitely support her to make this a permanent project. But for future projects, it shouldn't require a superwoman like Auntie Blanche to make it happen. I feel like the state should take a more proactive role in it. I've also been feeding the homeless in Waimanalo with a church, and we've been driving around to the various cars and tents and such. And it's very clear that there's a lot of people that they just need mental health services, right? And I know there are a lot of homeless groups that are focused on that, and we need to continue supporting those groups and support them more. The last thing about homelessness is to create affordable housing. And that is for working families. Housing is so expensive in Kailua and Waimanalo that if people are, have a single income, it is really hard to afford housing. It's hard to find the right sites. There's a lot of,
Lisa, your pal. It's Alan's turn now.
Thank you. I also really want to aloha Auntie Blanche McMillan and Auntie Mabel working on the Kahale in Waimanalo. I'm a frequent visitor actually, and I'm a consultant on their board, operating and helping to address the issues. One of the big things I think we don't talk about enough is addressing homelessness. We have to address the homeless, right? And what have we seen is the criminalization of the homeless. That's what we've seen. So they think by sweeping them away and looking down at them that they're not to be given the same rights and access that we do, that it's a problem to be addressed. But they're people, they're our community members, and they're really struggling. And what we need to do is address the foundational issues. Lisa brought up some good points about affordable housing, but it's not their homelessness is not always about not being able to afford a place to live, but they're dealing with criminal convictions for sleeping in the park and not having access to their IDs and documents because the police took those things away when they were arrested. So I've been helping and guiding Auntie Blanche and others in my criminal justice background in addressing that. The second thing we also have to look at is providing wraparound services, right? So whether it's substance abuse issues, whether it's mental health issues, or whether it's economic issues, right? Can they get a job if they don't have an ID or access to a cell phone or an address so that they can get calls and get mail? We need to address all those things. And homelessness isn't a simple issue. It's an issue that plagued cities and states across the nation and across the world for some time. So we really have to be candid with what we're addressing. Are we getting rid of the homeless, or are we addressing their issues and helping them get back on their feet? So I want to put those to the forefront of helping them get back on their feet immediately. Thank you.
Okay, next person, Coby.
So, in addressing the homelessness issue we have, we really need to look at it from multiple angles because it is a multifaceted issue. And to effectively deal with the crisis we're experiencing, We need to work with the city and county as well as the state in collaboration jointly to find solutions that work for long-term betterment of our homeless population. Currently, due to profound lack of social workers and infrastructure, we have the city and county and HPD dealing with homelessness across the state, and even running homeless camps like the one on Sand Island. And the HPD is already short-staffed, and they shouldn't be running social programs that trained professionals like social workers should be running. As a representative, I'll work to ensure that we pay our social workers better and hire more social workers so that we can provide our homeless individuals the support they need. Specifically speaking to the Kauhale project, I really appreciate Auntie Blanche for what she has done in helping that community. However, I believe it could have been done better. I was part of this discussion back in its early stages in 2018, and I saw great merit in its development, and the process was, that was completed this year. It just wasn't correct, and it didn't really meaningfully solve the homeless problem in Waimanalo in the long run. It is a temporary shelter, but if we saw that even after the project was completed, the number of homeless along Waimanalo Beach Park didn't change because people moved out and others moved in. I think going forward, we need to make sure that the projects are done properly and to the fullest extent of the plan. It could have been done even better, I believe. I mean, it is helping the homeless problem, but it could have been done even better if we just put a little bit more thought into it, got a little bit more input from the community,
15.
and continue to work on it. Going forward, I'd like to see more Kauhale-like projects in our area to create long-term solutions in our district. I will work with the neighborhood board and all stakeholders to ensure any future Kauhale projects are carried out properly and ensure it effectively solves the homelessness in our district.
Aloha. Scott, thank you.
Houselessness is a growing problem in our district. The good news is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Every municipality in the country is dealing with houselessness. They're using different strategies, and we can see which ones work better and implement those here. Personally, I favor Salt Lake City's approach. They went with something they call housing first, in which houseless people are given housing with no preconditions, and then once they have that stability of housing, then they're offered the wraparound social services that they need to get out of addiction or to get back into the workforce. So here's what I propose for Hawaii in the short term and the long term. In the short term, we need to stop new people from becoming houseless. Obviously, we're in an economic crisis right now. So if the state used some of the rainy day funds to get people's rent paid or their mortgages paid so that they're not evicted and so that they don't join the houseless population, that'll save us a lot of work in the future. Also, we need to build more kauhale for the currently homeless, for the currently houseless. Kauhale are Hawaii's version of the housing first approach to houselessness. They allow us to get the houseless people into a stable situation where we can have better access to social services. In the long term, though, we need to attack the root causes of houselessness: poverty wages, lack of affordable housing, addiction, untreated mental health problems. And the way we do that is by instituting a living wage, by fighting for affordable housing. I'm the only candidate who supports the Affordable Housing Project in Kailua. And by increasing access and funding for addiction treatment and mental health treatment. And finally, we need our congressional delegation to pass a federal law that bans municipalities from sending houseless people on a one-way ticket to somewhere else. For too long, Hawaii has been a dumping ground for other municipalities' houseless populations. We have our own problems here, but we can't be a dumping ground any longer.
Thank you, Scott. Melodie?
Okay, this question deals with food sustainability. Before the 1920s, all food consumed were grown and harvested in Hawaii. But today, over 90% of our food is shipped in. The Ulupono Initiative advocates for 30% food sustainability by 2030. Do you think this is realistic? And if so, what incentives and support would you offer to farmers, ranchers, and agricultural enterprises to bolster Hawaii's food production? That's your question, and the order of the answer shall come from Alan, Colby, Scott, and Lisa. So Alan, take it away.
Thank you, and a great question. The first thing we need to do is, really address the issue of carrying capacity, right? If we're guessing in 20 years, we want to make sure our production of sustainable food sources, we have to anticipate what that means. And is there ways to combat that carrying capacity issue we've had on this island? So when we talk about our generational ability to sustain our food production, it's because we knew just how many people, and they matched each other. Production and carrying capacity worked hand in hand. So we knew how much we needed to produce and how many people that was gonna feed and take care of. So I think we cannot just ignore the fact that setting realistic goals is gonna help us get there. So whether it's realistic if we commit to it. One of the ways in which we do that is through education. Get young people involved, and one way is having them see it. So, you know, having and increasing incentives and grants to programs like Food to School, right? So making our students see, hey, this is local produce that we eat at lunch, that we eat at breakfast. It's food that we love, and it comes from our community. And then coupling that with educational programs that get students away from the test and get away from standardized testing, that the only available job or the only job that you should want comes from a college degree. We need to get people invested in, hey, farming and sustainable practice. There's a lot of kids that are very interested in getting into those types of fields, but they don't really feel that education is leading them towards that path because they want to, you know, be taught the tests. So we really need to incentivize our educational capacity towards generating a need for sustainability, long-term and short-term. So that's some of the ideas I have for making that commitment realistic. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Alan. And at this time, let's hear from Coby Chock.
So, you know, bringing agriculture to Hawaii and really expanding it to be 30% sustainability here by 2030 is very difficult just because of the high cost to own a farm and operate the farm here, with real estate being so high and everything having to be shipped in most of the time to run the farm. However, I don't think it's impossible. I think it's very realistic to do so, but not in the way that we think so. The easiest way to get to this capacity very quickly is through conventional agriculture. And I think with conventional agriculture and the right kind of investment, we can get this thing done in 5 years. We just till a bunch of land, run machines through, harvest tons and tons of produce every year. But really, this isn't what we want. Just because we can do it doesn't mean this is necessarily what we want and we should do. Because really, academic discussion has kind of shown that it's feasible, but it's difficult at the same time because you're balancing dealing with environmental issues as well as production issues. And the reality is Hawaii is just really expensive, and the real estate's expensive, and the agricultural product will be very expensive. And if we were to produce more, all of the local farmers would actually make less because it would drive down the price because the supply would go up. And aside from these economic dilemmas, the use of conventional agricultural practices really in a 10-year frame could be done, but it would really harm our environment with runoff and pollution in our waters. And really, to me, it's more ethically important to take care of our environment and make sure we do this right than meeting this goal to do it by 2030. That being said, I believe the best path forward is working toward this goal and offering more agricultural subsidies to complement the USDA programs, and also promote more incentives for farmers to go organic and practice environmentally friendly farming. Over time, I'm confident that we will not only meet but exceed this goal, but not in the 10 years that we want to, unfortunately, but we will make it.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's hear from Scott Grimmer.
Growing your own food is like printing your own money. It's time for Hawaii to print a little more of that money. First, we need to improve our land use rules. Too much agricultural land has been rezoned for housing. That land needs to stay agricultural. And I mean also that the gentleman farmers who are taking it up and using it for housing and not really farming, we need to replace them with local farmers who are going to produce food for us. What I would do to stimulate food production is offer tax credits for agricultural and aquacultural production. And I would expand programs like the program they had on Hawaii Island, the Bucks program that doubled SNAP or food stamp credits for people who bought fresh produce at local farmers markets. But most importantly, when I'm looking at a big business decision, I'm going to think to myself, is there a market for it? Hawaii farmers are not going to produce more food until there's more of a market for Hawaii food. The way I would make a guaranteed market for Hawaii food is I would have the state government commit to buying local produce for the schools, for lunches and breakfasts, and for the prisons. If we do that, we'll guarantee a local market for the local produce, we'll stimulate supply, and eventually we'll hit the 30% goal, we'll hit the 100% goal. We might even be able to export food one day.
Okay, thank you very much. Then let's go on to Lisa Marten. You're on mute.
Lisa, unmute yourself.
Okay,
Okay.
done. Sorry. So food security is a serious issue for Hawaii. My father actually wrote a book on food security. And about a 10-day supply if our harbors are shut by a natural disaster, a war, or a pandemic. And so it's basically because there's all this just-in-time stocking going on now in the modern distribution system. So if our harbors were damaged by a natural disaster, a lot of the warehouses are actually near there as well. So that food supply would be damaged. So it does help if we have local farming. Luckily, we can grow food year-round here. And you know, Hawaii was agricultural. The entire Hawaiian population was fed right here. And then we exported agriculture for a long time. So it's a perfect place to grow food. Local agriculture will not be cheaper, probably, than imported food. But the difference is that instead of sending our money outside, we're keeping that money here for jobs. And it is healthier. Like Alan said, I love that he mentioned the kids can get excited about food grown in their own community, food served in their own school cafeterias. So farming is hard work though, and it doesn't appeal to everyone, but luckily it really is in vogue right now among the youth. And there are a lot of troubled youth that just don't connect to school, don't necessarily connect to other things. And this is something exciting, that an opportunity we can give them that will you know, bring them meaning and work. They say that Waimanalo is God's country, and I do think that every time I'm there. We also have some farming land in Manawili. So we can support farming right now in our district. It's a perfect spot. There's an awesome program called Go Farm that teaches people of any age, trains them how to farm, how to do the business side, gives them a small plot to practice on. We should promote those programs. We can have shared processing facilities to so more people can be employed and they can create higher value products.
Okay, thank you very much.
Co-op and agricultural.
We're having some technical difficulties. Oh, Flora, can you wait a moment before we start on the next question? Joe, can I ask you if you could try to just highlight the speakers?
I don't know how to do that, but I would tell everyone that if you wanted to see just the speaker, on the upper right corner of your screen, click on speaker view.
Actually, Joe, we've texted you how to put it on speaker. So Flora and I can continue on with the next question. And Flora, I'll time for you.
Thank you. The next question has to do with livable wage and benefits. The current minimum wage is $10.10 an hour. What do you consider to be a livable wage and why? What is your position on paid family leave and paid sick leave? The order of the speakers will be Coby, Scott, Lisa, and Alan. Coby?
I support a minimum wage that allows for the working class to live and provide for their families. The idea to raise the minimum wage to $15 by 2045, I believe that's too little too late. The $15 minimum wage needs to be implemented sooner, as by 2024, there will be little to no difference in the real wages, as inflation will have offset the increase in pay. So it really negates everything. As a representative, I will immediately work to raise the minimum wage much sooner to help our working class families survive here in Hawaii. Additionally, I find it necessary to also look at the secondary impacts of such a measure, as it really will affect our local and small businesses. Here in Kailua and Waimanalo, we treasure the local businesses that define the character of our communities. And I want to make sure that raising the minimum wage doesn't kick our local businesses while they're down. The recent developments with COVID-19 and the impact it has on our small businesses has really been dire. and many businesses across the state are struggling to stay afloat or have decided to close. To me, it's important that if we were to raise the minimum wage now, that we also have safeguards in place to support our local businesses and allow them to operate and compete against big businesses. That's why I support, if we were to do it now, a wage subsidy that offsets the difference in wages for small businesses until they're able to fully recover and operate normally again post-COVID-19. As far as paid and family and sick leave, I believe that this is not even a question. Paid family and sick leave is a necessity, so our hardworking families can take care of themselves, take care of their families, and not have to choose between putting a roof over their heads or going to work sick. And as a representative, I will work to always put our working class families first.
15.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Scott's turn.
The minimum wage should be raised to $18 an hour and indexed to inflation so that we don't have to fight every year at the legislature for a higher minimum wage. The way I got to $18 is because the MIT living wage calculator says that for Honolulu, $16.50 is the living wage. But what the calculator doesn't take into account is any money left over for savings. And one thing that this pandemic has showed us is that the government safety net is not always where it needs to be, and it's not always timely. So I believe that in addition to meeting their immediate needs, workers should be able to save money. That's how I got to $18 an hour. Now I'm a businessman, and the reason I believe in a living wage is because I have experience with it. At one point, I actually raised the wages of my employees by 50%. And what I found is that my profits increased. And the reason why is because by raising their wages, it allowed them to think of it more as a career than just a short-term job. They invested in their own skills. They became more productive. Plus, it lowered the amount of time I needed to search for new employees because my turnover dropped. And it lowered the amount of time I needed to train employees. So I was able to use that time to grow the business even more. So I think it's by raising to $18, we can support working families, we can create new demand from those higher wages, those families supporting other businesses, and we can help businesses at the same time. When it comes to paid family leave and paid sick leave, I think the government should allow for 16 weeks of paid family leave and paid sick leave. It's an embarrassment that the US is the only industrialized country that doesn't have paid family leave and paid sick leave. And I think this pandemic has showed us another reason why we need paid sick leave. And that's, we want people when they're sick to stay home. But when people are in poverty and they're sick, they feel like they need to go to work or they can't eat. But if people go to work when they're sick, that can help spread a pandemic. So I support 16 weeks of paid family leave and paid sick leave.
Thank you. Lisa?
Okay. All right, so I support raising the minimum wage. The number that DBED came up with to enable a single person here in Hawaii to meet their own basic needs was $17 an hour. So I support that. As part of preparation for the job that I'm running for, I visited to homeless service events and talked to everybody. The woman who was helping the homeless get jobs explained to me that what happens is there are enough jobs, minimum wage jobs for them, but when they start working, they have housing subsidy. And as they go along, their housing subsidy is reduced. And before it's even reduced to zero, they can't pay their rent and they are forced back into homelessness again. In fact, she was a single mom and she had a master's degree and she had been in and out of homelessness herself as somebody in a service, a social work type job. So yeah, we definitely need that here in Hawaii. I support paid sick leave and paid family leave. COVID-19 makes it clear that we all benefit when people can stay home when they're sick and keep their germs to themselves. Most people at some point need to take care of a loved one or welcome a new loved one to their family. Companies already have these benefits. We could set up an insurance fund paid into by the employer and the employee, kind of like Social Security, to create a safety net. That's all.
Thank you, Lisa. Alan, I think it's your turn.
Thank you. So I support a 15 minimum wage immediately. I mean, we can't just talk about how high it can get. but at least set a floor. And while they call it a minimum wage, a livable wage shouldn't just be what's the bare minimum we could afford to pay our workers. So I think we need to get to the $15 minimum wage immediately, and then tie future increases in the minimum wage to the consumer price index. That way, you know, like Scott said, and has been said over and over again, we shouldn't be politicizing a fight for a minimum wage increase every few years at the legislature. Tie it to something that is going to scale with the actual economic realities. But we have to do other things in that, because our cost of living isn't going to match inflation. It's different. So one thing is getting rid of the tip credit. Everyone has been talking about getting rid of this tip credit because it's not utilized in the ways that they think is going to be helpful. Now, in responding to the second part of the question between paid family leave and paid sick leave, we definitely need to institute a paid family as well as sick leave program, at least 8 to 12 weeks to get us started, because that's the expectation, is that people shouldn't have to choose between a paycheck and whether they can care for their family or for themselves. It's been shown that productivity, morale, as well as just an understanding that it's a mutual benefit to employers. So by instituting these programs as social safety nets, what it does is it prevents employers and employees from fighting about how we're gonna take an approach to business. Is it about workers' rights and employment and wages, or is it going to be about profit, right? But you take that out of the equation and both are going to see a boost in their productivity as well as hopefully revenue. And we also need to look at how that affects long-term and how we're going to do that. So having an employer-employee contribution into these funds, so we know how we're going to pay for it and not just assume that the state's going to take that burden. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, thank you very much, Alan. At this time, we'll go to our next question on climate change. Climate change is causing sea level rise and more frequent extreme weather. What mitigation measures would you propose to protect and preserve our coastal communities and eroding shorelines? What would you propose to help Hawaii adapt to the adverse impacts of climate change? Okay, the order will be Scott, Lisa, Alan, and Coby. So this time, Scott, you have the floor.
Man-made climate change is going to wreak havoc on Hawaii. A 3-foot sea level rise in the coming decades will mean $13 billion in lost structures and land, and 13,000 residents displaced. Most of Waikiki will be underwater, so our tourism industry will be disrupted. The best time to fight climate change was 20 years ago. But the second best time is now. We need to start a managed retreat from the coasts. We need to hurricane-proof structures. We need to improve drainage in low-lying areas. We should be removing seawalls. We should be planting more native forests to remove carbon dioxide from our atmosphere and to prevent erosion. And we should move to all electric cars and buses to limit our contribution to climate change. These projects will be expensive, but doing nothing will be more expensive. Let's start the work now when we have low interest rates and a lot of unemployed workers. At least that way we'll save a lot of money versus doing those things at a time of high interest rates and low unemployment.
Okay, thank you very much. Lisa Marten, please.
All right. So I'm a public health professional, and I see climate change as the biggest public health crisis of our time. Schools, it's not in the future, it's now. Schools are already too hot to learn in. There's more frequent hurricane threats, flooding. I actually walked through a friend's farm in Waimanalo a couple weeks ago, and she showed me where it had all been turned into a river just a couple years ago, and she lost everything. There's erosion of the beaches, coastal infrastructure. We have highways along the coast falling in, and coral bleaching the last few years, every year. We need more trees to sequester carbon, to absorb the stormwater when we get the heavy rains, and to keep us cool. Without trees and shade, we have a heat island effect, and our cities and urban areas get superheated. Mapping shows that we're actually losing tree canopy on Oahu instead of gaining it. The Norfolk subdivision, they cleared all the ag land there, a huge forest, and it's now a gentleman's farm, or actually an elite subdivision. So we need to protect our land. I planted thousands of native trees with school groups in collaboration with DLNR on the watershed of Hamakua Marsh and Kailua. And I've planted shade trees in Lanikai Park, promoted the increase of urban canopy across Oahu as part of Trees for Honolulu's Future. But we need a lot more done. There's been a lot of lofty goals and not much budget to go with them. For coastal, protecting the coastlines, all new building and renovations have to plan ahead for resilience in the face of sea level rise, storm surges, and rising water tables. The planning involves design, materials, and relocation, especially of all our public projects away from threatened areas. We have to think long term.
15.
Are at risk of storm surge as the sea level rises. And in Kailua, especially along the canal going into Enchanted Lakes, that's also at risk when sea level rises. So we will have damage right here for sure. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Lisa. At this time, let's turn to Alan Akao.
Thank you. In addressing that question, the very first thing we need to do is we need to stop shoreline hardening structures or seawalls. It's been proven that it does more damage than it does good. And usually it's for the benefit of specific individuals with residential lots that are near the ocean side or near coastal cliff areas. We understand that that's gonna be a burden for these families and for these property owners. But it's the smart thing to do, it's the sensible thing to do. We need to couple that with ensuring that going forward, we have residential and neighborhood planning that keeps these communities from building right near the oceanfront lots, because while it is a luxury and one of the reasons people love Hawaii, when that land recedes and when erosion and climate change affects their property, they're going to look to the state and ask for compensation when they know that those types of things are going to happen. And instead what they do is they build seawalls, and that is going to harm the long-term effects of the erosion. So we really got to enforce a stoppage to that mentality. And going forward, we also need to make sure that there's larger setbacks so that we don't have to just address it as the erosion gets closer and closer and closer. We need to figure out what is the best route so that these properties are going to be protected long-term. So those are the things immediately that come to mind in addressing some of the issues that we're dealing with climate change and erosion in our coastal management areas. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Alan. Now let's hear from Coby Chock.
So with the influence of climate change has come really a lot of persisting issues. One of them including is sea level rises, which is something that all of the candidates, I believe, spoke to, or most of them. And it's really caused a lot of other issues with home ownership. And aside from just that, also we have more and more natural disasters, and the frequent occurrences is probably most likely linked to climate change as well. This makes it a very pressing policy concern for me to address in order to make sure we can protect Hawaii and the citizens who are going to be affected by this. First, I support our efforts to rapidly shift to bringing our energy to Hawaii instead of bringing it in through fossil fuels. I believe that we need to work more heavily towards bringing renewable energy to Hawaii and making sure that it's something that we can really rely on to combat climate change here. And that's a topic I'm going to expand on a little bit later. Secondly, we must directly address the issues of our coast. Waters have risen up to 10 inches since 1950. Seawalls are not the long-term solution. They eventually cause faster beach loss and erosion, and the solutions of maintaining current positions along the coast are not yet discerned. Currently, experts are advising that more development ought to be encouraged inland as sea level rise will continue to be aggressive on the global and Pacific scale if trends hold. And the ocean can't be held back. The ocean's always going to win. This works jointly with my policy on affordable housing, where we can work towards building more homes and encouraging development where they're not in danger of natural disasters and sea level rise. If a viable solution provided by experts in the field allow for our coastal residents to be maintained long-term, I'll seek out that solution for Hawaii. Lastly, on the front of addressing beach erosion, I fully support efforts of utilizing our equipment to bring in sand to beaches that are experiencing rapid erosion. It's not a permanent solution again, but at least it'll preserve the beach that we have and hopefully allow more of our local residents to be able to enjoy it just a little bit longer and continuing to have a beach as opposed to no beach at all. So those are the main things I would look at in dealing with climate change.
Okay, thank you very much, Coby.
Melodie and I debated whether we should have made that a one question or two questions. So for this forum, we have a second part, which is renewable energy. 21.56% of Oahu's electricity is generated by sources such as oil, 61.3%, coal, 17.14%, solar, 13.54%, biomass, 5.4%, and wind, which is 1.93%. What would you propose to meet the 100% renewable energy mandate by 2045? I think we were wise, Melodie, to break it down. Okay, the order of speakers will be Lisa, Alan, Coby, and Scott. Lisa?
All right. So renewable energy in Hawaii has multiple benefits. We save money. About 30% of our electricity now comes from renewable sources, and our electric bills have gone down. More of the money we spend on renewable energy stays in Hawaii in the form of jobs. It slows climate change, and it makes the air healthier to breathe. The focus of my nonprofit, one of them has been lobbying for renewable energy in collaboration with other groups like Blue Planet Foundation and legislators like Representative Chris Lee. I was involved in pushing for the incremental steps that eventually got us to the 2045 carbon neutral mandate. The legal commitment is there, but we need small steps to close the loopholes. For example, Hawaii Gas should be held to the same standards as HECO. Right now they're exempt. We need to correct the bad math we use to calculate the percentage of renewable energy. We need to continually update and enforce standards for our building codes. These would include public charging stations and commercial buildings and condominiums that are, matched to the capacity of those buildings. We need to get infrastructure and incentives in place for transportation, including dates where we will phase out different types of combustion engine vehicles. We need to lead the way with the state and city contracts and fleets to get us started. To complement these measures, we need a carbon tax so that the cost of fossil fuels includes all the externalities that burning it creates. I prefer a tax that's returned to the taxpayers, so it changes their incentives. When they go to buy gas, it's more expensive, but it's not regressive. It doesn't punish poor people more, because gas would be a larger percentage of their expenditures. So anyways, this is a major thing for me. You know that I will work on it because it's something that I have worked on for 10 years. It's really important to me. I feel that we can also create a business for ourselves, being leaders and forerunners in this area. We can export our technology and our know-how to other places. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Alan?
Thank you. I think the very first thing we need to do is we need to convince our government that our employee retirement system, ERS, divest from investing in fossil fuel-based industries. So if we're going to invest and speculate to pay off our employment retirement system on fossil fuel companies, how can we step into the role and say we're going to be leaders in that area unless we speak that truth? So I think that's the first thing we need to do, is show that commitment that we're not going to, on one hand, invest in those things and hope for a good return, and at the same time be committed towards renewable energy. Second, we need to get a stronger renewable energy tax credit set up. I think, as Lisa said, maybe something like a carbon tax, but I think it's gonna be regressive at the start of the day because it puts it on the consumer or the citizens, but we have to hold the companies accountable. So instead of making it something that the person driving to work has to figure out, it should be on the large corporations that are the biggest polluters and the biggest users of the fossil fuel industry energy. And last, as I mentioned before, I think there needs to be equitable distribution of energy projects, whether it's wind or solar or geothermal. What we've seen is that communities, at first they're all for it until they've seen that they're being exploited and it's being low income or native Hawaiian communities that's where they're going to build these programs, and that's where they're going to build these generators instead of spreading it out throughout the communities in an equitable manner. So yes, there's some environmental justice issues wrapped up into all of this that I think we need to address if we really want to be committed
15.
to 100% renewable energy. Thank you.
Mahalo, Alan. Coby?
So, Chris Lee took us in a great direction with his renewable energy initiative to have the state move to 100% renewable energy by 2045. And it's really up to us, who's filling his seat, and the other representatives as well, to make sure that it's carried out. And we need to make sure that we have broad implementation of innovative technologies such as smart inverters, where Hawaii's energy capacity will be able to effectively convert solar power into usable consumer energy statewide. One of the things that I believe our state could improve on is looking at other sources of renewable energy. Right now, we focus primarily on wind and solar to increase and expand our capacity in the state. However, I believe we could also look at other things such as geothermal and wave power and other things that can really be used to supplement solar and wind as well. Because at nighttime, we don't have sun, and there are certain days where we just don't have wind either. And we need to make sure that regardless of the situation, the weather, because we can't control the weather, regardless of the situation, we need to make sure that we have power and that Hawaii won't need to regress back to relying on fossil fuels later on. I believe that looking into geothermal, hydro, and other viable sources can really help us to not only increase our capacity to improve upon our renewable energy here, but it could also open up a new field. Hawaii is one of the few places that can run geothermal and all of the different types of renewable energy producing systems here. And we can use that to our advantage to really develop a new STEM field here in Hawaii and diversify our economy. One of the big things is we always focus on tourism, and we don't really have any renewable or any sources of natural resources here. So we need to depend on STEM fields, and this is very well one of the things we can depend on to go forward and bring Hawaii through to the 21st, 22nd, 23rd century.
Mahalo. Scott?
Fossil fuels are poisoning our water at Red Hill. Fossil fuels are poisoning our air. And fossil fuels are leading to global warming, which Hawaii is not prepared for. The only advantage that fossil fuels have over renewable energy is that the sun is only up 12 hours a day and the winds are variable. And until recently, it has been difficult to store solar energy and wind energy that isn't used immediately. That is changing. Last month, HECO awarded contracts for 3 gigawatts of battery storage of renewable energy. When Oahu's last coal plant closes in 2022 and Maui's oil plant closes in 2024, we're ready to replace that energy with renewable energy. Not only are we going to get cleaner energy out of the deal, we're going to be getting high-paying green jobs. And if we master the energy storage puzzle faster than other places do, we can export our knowledge and bring even more money back to Hawaii. If I'm elected, I'm going to make sure that HECO is at the forefront of research and development for energy storage, and that it is exporting that technology. Now, up front, as we switch to renewable energy, there are going to be some costs. And I think big oil should pay those costs. I support the city's lawsuit against big oil. And I think it could be like the tobacco lawsuits. They could be liable for a lot of money that could help us speed up our transition to green energy.
Thank you, Scott. Melodie?
Okay, next question is on public education. Given the shortages in the state budget, teacher shortages, and the risk of coronavirus, what is your position on increased funding for public education? And how would you fund it, and by how much of an increase? All right, now the order will be Alan, Coby, Scott, and Lisa. So Alan, take it away.
Thank you. I'm first proud to say I'm a product of public education, and it's hard to say what is the pros and cons if you really haven't lived that experience. So I'm a proud graduate, and I've always been supportive of public education going forward. And one of the ways we're going to do that is looking at innovative ideas, or ideas that they might not seem like they're going to work, but why not? Why haven't we tried that? One thing I brought up is making dual jurisdiction between the city and the state in assisting in the funding of public education. We see that a lot of the public schools have adjacent parks and there's recreation centers that the city and county is in charge of. There's also talk about land swaps and things like that, but why don't we have both of them put some skin in the game and assist in funding public education? Because we know that the county governments want to be involved. We see that model on the mainland and then other places where property taxes assist in the funding of public education. And we don't do that here in Hawaii, but why not? So looking into that route of this dual jurisdiction so that the counties can be in charge of facilities and maintenance, and that land is then leased to the Department of Education, it frees up the money flow for teachers, it frees up the money flow for technology advances, and it frees up money for other services and improving our food capability and transportation for students. Another thing that's been pitched before, and I think can still be successful, is the constitutional amendment. Now, what happened is legislative leaders tinkered it in a way that got it, it became unfeasible when it went up to the Supreme Court. Now, I would work to reintroduce that constitutional amendment, but make it in a way that's stronger and that it actually passes instead of being tinkered with by legislative leadership, because it's for education. That was the goal. So how do we do that? Those are my ideas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Coby?
So thank you for this question. Public education has been one of the most heavily impacted things by COVID-19. And addressing this impact is of utmost importance to me, and I'm sure to everybody here. Our teachers took a 20% pay cut with a lot of other public employees, and I believe that's unjust because really we need to make sure that our teachers are getting paid better. There's teachers who have been teaching for decades who are getting paid less now than they were when they first started, and that's just wrong. It should be increased over time. And making sure we can get these steps back on track so that teachers are shown the respect that they deserve after really looking out for our keiki, looking out for our future. They're incredibly vital to the functionality of society, and I want to make sure that we can take care of them. As such, I believe they should receive proper care and adequate funding towards salaries, as well as supporting their training to curb the economic costs of becoming a teacher. Some other states have training available to the teacher, then they fund the training. Our state does not, and all of the teachers who go on to get better training, which is something that we would not expect, but hope our teachers to do, it shouldn't be coming out of their own pocket. And they shouldn't be having to go to school and worried about how they're gonna pay for their own things at home and also pay for the things in their classroom because we can't adequately fund them. Making sure that the people in the field are taken care of is something that's really, really important to me. And for a long time, our education system has been neglected. I will pursue this issue heavily in the legislature, especially during the crisis, to make sure that our teachers' jobs are supported. And this can be even done by dedicating some of the money from the CARES Act, that's currently in the Rainy Day Fund, to paying the teachers at the moment. And also ensuring that education is a vital structure in Hawaii's Hawaii that is continually supported. Overall, teachers and our first responders are really critical to our future, and looking out for them is what's most important to me. Thank you.
Okay, very good, Coby. Thank you very much. Scott Grimmer?
I'd increase funding for public education by as much as we need to hire the 1,000 teachers that we're short and to put air conditioning in every classroom. To get the 1,000 teachers, though, we need to do more than just increase pay. We need to increase recruitment in Hawaii. When we hire Hawaii locals to be teachers, they're almost twice as likely to still be teaching 5 years later as the teachers we hire from the mainland. Let's recruit more locals into teaching by offering high school students here free college tuition if they're willing to commit to 5 years of teaching in Hawaii public schools after graduation. Then we've got to air condition the classrooms for our teachers and our keiki. A new study out this year shows that for every degree hotter the temperature is inside the classroom, students learn 1% less. Air conditioning the classroom is a cost-effective way to increase learning and make sure that all of our keiki are getting a great education to start their lives. Now, to pay for the extra funding for these measures, I'd close the loophole in Hawaii's tax code that allows multinational corporations to avoid paying state corporate income taxes, which is costing us at least $40 million per year.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, let's hear from Lisa Marten.
Okay, So I don't think we cut teachers' pay yet. I hope they don't. I've spent a lot of time over the last several years working in schools, public schools, private schools, and I've seen that there is a huge variety in terms of the quality of the experience for the kids, depending on the school. Some of our public schools are amazing and some of them are harder. Doing workshops, sometimes I am dripping with sweat for the ones that don't have AC yet or good ventilation. So teachers, but one thing that I have noticed that is consistent across every school is that the teachers are extremely motivated and caring. And I think they deserve to be paid for the jobs they do. They deserve to be supported. I was doing a training for our science curriculum at the last Teacher Institute Day, and I slipped into the forum before my training to listen, and it was shocking. They are lobbying, basically doing what the state should be doing, which is trying to figure out how to solve the teacher shortage and lobbying for strategies that would just get people willing to do the job of teaching, especially for special ed, for Hawaiian language, hard to fill locations. So I feel that they, the things that were in bills going into COVID they're merited and we want to do those. How are we going to pay for it? I agree with Alan about the surcharge, the state surcharge for second homes, over $1 million. That was in the constitutional amendment before. The fact that our counties don't fund education means our property taxes are the cheapest in the nation. And that makes it super appealing to investors, whether they're from other countries or just out of state, to buy property here as an investment, and it can sit empty or it can be used as illegal vacation rentals. Either way, it aggravates our housing shortage. So going back and trying that again, the problem was that originally the funds were earmarked for education and that got changed. If we start again, I think that could be the solution to paying our teachers what they deserve so they will actually, we can recruit enough qualified teachers instead of having so many long-term subs and unqualified people teaching our kids.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Oh, okay.
Flora?
The next question has to do with Medicare. Given the coronavirus pandemic and the imminent need for PPEs, ventilators, increased need to fill the 800 physicians shortage, what is your position on Medicare for all and universal health care and why? So the order of the speakers will be Coby, Scott, Lisa, and Alan. Coby?
Before you start, it's 7 o'clock, which was the end of this meeting. How long are you going to continue on?
No, it's 7:30.
I believe it was publicized for 7:30. Joe, can you stay with us?
Well, I can stay with you. I'm just asking how long you want. 7:30? Okay.
Yes, that's how we publicized it.
Okay, that's not how it was programmed, though.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank
So let's go back to Coby.
Okay. So it's my view, policy-wise, that we need to implement legislation that allows for as much healthcare coverage across the state and country as a whole. The effects of COVID highlights this now is more than ever. And it's in the best interest of the government as well as the American people that we do this to ensure that our community members can get the help they need in terms of medical care to take care of themselves. As we look into other countries, we see some with the system performing better, others doing not as well. But we ought to reflect on the nature of the healthcare system that we have and the healthcare systems that we have in other places across the nation and globally, and see how it can be revolutionized to be more accessible to our working class, our lower income families as well. Healthcare is an imperative structure of all well-functioning societies, and I believe we ought to find a model that can work best for both our country and our state specifically. This way we can quash the enormous medical bills that drown our ohana, and the country can truly start providing compassionate care to its citizens. Specifically in regards to the physician shortages, a fellow candidate running in District 50, Patrick Branco, has an excellent proposal. Effectively, he has an idea that would set up a pipeline to sponsor high school students interested in becoming physicians and paying the cost of attendance to medical school. And in exchange for the fulfillment of their doctorate degree, they would then practice medicine in Hawaii for a number of years. The structure of the solution is so effective that it can also be applied to the previous question in dealing with teachers, where students seeking to become a teacher can be sponsored, as they also are in great shortage here in our state. I would fully support and work with Pat Bronco on this proposal in the legislature and really combat multiple issues in one piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Coby. Scott?
I support Medicare for all. I support Medicare for all. Healthcare is a human right, full stop. Adopting Medicare for all nationally would catch us up to the rest of the world. Every country in the rich world has universal healthcare, and most of them have better maternal mortality rates, infant mortality rates, and life expectancy than we do. Plus, they deliver their results at a fraction of the cost. Most rich countries spend about 10% of GDP on healthcare. We spend 17%. What does that mean? It's about an extra $7,000 per person in Hawaii that we're wasting on inferior healthcare. Our congressional delegation needs to make Medicare for all happen. Until then, we at the state level need to keep Medicare for all at the forefront. I'll leave you with my favorite statistic about healthcare. 0. That's the number of countries that have tried universal healthcare and then abandoned it. There's a reason for that. Universal healthcare is better.
Okay, our next, Lisa?
Okay, so in public health and medicine, we have been talking about this for decades. But basically, everyone needs access to healthcare, and COVID has made it really clear that healthcare should not be tied to insurance. Health insurance should not be tied to employment, because people who lose their jobs then also lose their health insurance, which means in the short run, they'll avoid seeking healthcare, and in the long run, they'll end up on Medicaid. Medicare for all is a national policy, not a state one. Hawaii has a prepaid healthcare act so that employees that work 20 hours get healthcare from their employers. We did Medicaid expansion when the Affordable Care Act went into effect, and because of these measures, we are actually in really good shape compared to most of the country. We have the 3rd lowest uninsured rate. If the federal government were to adopt Medicare for all, then about the 4% that fall through the cracks would also get health coverage. And as for our physician shortage, when I worked at the medical school, this was always something that was an issue for us. There weren't that many HIV specialists outer island, so we would have a doctor and a nurse patient advocate do monthly clinics outer island. But it was hard to coordinate even service in between with a primary care provider because even they were in short supply, especially in Kona. So how would Medicare affect our physician, Medicare for all affect a physician shortage? It might help. Right now, Medicare pays much better than Medicaid, so that would be good for Hawaii physicians. And also they would get paid at the national rate instead of less due to the rates set by local private insurance companies. So I definitely support this. And while our situation in Hawaii is not as bad usually, unless there's massive unemployment, as the rest of the nation, this would help us as well.
Thank you. Alan?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I support Medicare for all, and making sure that once we reach that, we expand it into universal healthcare. I think people forget that Medicare, even for those that it applies to currently, there's still gaps. It's not a complete healthcare provision. There is gaps in it, but we need to start somewhere. We need to invest in it. We need to do it now. As Lisa had mentioned earlier, Hawaii had one of the very first prepaid healthcare benefit plans in the nation to ensure that employers and employees have healthcare and they have a mutual system that understands. But what about our unemployed, right? If it's an employer-employee situation, that it means you have to work to get healthcare. What about children? What about families that don't live traditional routes or self-employed? So we need to have a system that doesn't just support employer-employee relationships. We have to dig deeper. And we also need to make sure that that funding covers things that have become necessary. So we're not just talking about, a checkup but it has to include dental, vision, mental health services, substance abuse services, family planning. So those things have to be wrapped up because those things can cause mortality. Those things can have a profound effect on people's healthcare. And if we say, just normal pharmacy and visits is the maximum effort we're going to give in supporting our healthcare system, that's not enough. Why? And part of the reason there might be a physician shortage is there's specialties. Everyone doesn't want to be a general practitioner or someone that works in the emergency room. They want to be an OBGYN. They want to be in working with children. They want to be in
15.
Cancer, diagnosis. So we want to make sure that we provide them the tools to live their healthcare dream and to help us, that no one is restricted from being able to get positive healthcare treatment. Thank you.
Mahalo, Ellen. Melodie?
Yes, thank you very much. And this question goes to the Public Land Trust proceeds. Given the shortages in the state budget, what is your position on the 20% Public Land Trust proceeds, which are constitutionally mandated to be distributed to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs? The order will be Scott, Lisa, Alan, and Coby. Scott?
The Hawaii State Constitution says that OHA gets 20% of the revenues from the ceded lands for the betterment of the Hawaiian people. Right now, the legislature is not fulfilling its constitutional mandate and is letting OHA have only about 4% of the proceeds from the ceded lands. Look at the results. On their own islands, Native Hawaiians are disproportionately likely to be homeless, to be in jail, to be unemployed, to drop out of high school, to be infected by COVID-19, to die young. This is a deeply personal issue for me. 3 of my nieces and nephews are Native Hawaiian. I want them to grow up in a place that honors the Hawaiian language, the Hawaiian culture, and Hawaiian self-determination. I want them to grow up in a place that honors its commitments. When I'm elected, I'll fulfill my duty to the Constitution and Hawaiians by making sure OHA gets 20% of the revenues from ceded lands.
Okay, thank you very much. Lisa Marten.
Okay, so it is our constitutional mandate and we need to pay up, right? However, OHA does need to use it properly. And right now there is a fair bit of distrust, which is why it's really important for everybody to vote OHA and to research the candidates, right? If OHA had the funds and they were used as they were intended by the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, maybe they could get rid of some of the wait list. And if all those people got their housing, it would alleviate the need to take care of them with other government funds. I think right now about 1/3 of the homeless are Hawaiian and almost half of them people in prison. And so having the fact that homelessness is criminalized right now means that if we get people housed, it will alleviate other problems, but that's not why we need to do it. We need to do it because it's the law. There is an opportunity for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands to change the way that they build housing in communities so people don't have to wait as long. We need to change with the times so they could do multi-dwelling units or subsidies for rentals. Some of the funds could go to finishing off projects. I think there's some that were planned in Waimanalo, like the Waimanalo Village Playground, a Kapuna Center. So there are plenty ways that those funds would be used if they were given to OHA as is mandated.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Okay, at this time, let's turn to Alan Akao.
Thank you. It's constitutionally mandated. And we talk about how we're going to support the Office of Hawaiian Affairs because it's constitutionally mandated. And our legislative leadership hasn't done it. They haven't done it for years. Why is that? They try and say, well, there's distrust at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs so that maybe we don't have to give them their money or they have to justify the money that they're receiving. That's not what constitutionally mandated means. It means that when the budget is laid out and we calculate how much of the public land trust through those ceded lands, how much revenue they generate, 20% must go to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. It's not conditional upon whether we think it's being used in the proper ways or not. And you know why? It's because they have shortchanged the Office of Hawaiian Affairs for years. And every time there's a challenge, the state legislature puts the burden back on the Office of Foreign Affairs to justify or calculate, oh, how much do we owe you? You figure it out and send us the bill, and we'll cut that bill and we'll send you what we think you deserve. That is not what a constitutional mandate is. That doesn't show support. And being a Native Hawaiian myself, I've seen and I've advocated many times for this fair, and not just fair, it's what's right, what's legally required. It's right on every level. So there has to be an investment that we're gonna believe in the Constitution and we're gonna believe in the laws and get these things done. And I understand that what we're gonna use it for, that's not the point. The point is that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is constitutionally mandated to receive that funds. Should they work with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands for Housing? Yes, but those are two separate entities. Those are things that need to be funded regardless of whether we think it's right or wrong, because it's legally required. So yes, I support the Office of Hawaiian Affairs getting that 20% of public land trust funds, and without restrictions and immediately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Okay, let's turn now to Coby Chock.
So thank you for that question. The Kanaka have been neglected here for too long, for hundreds of years, or over 100 years now. They've kind of just been walked over, and that's kind of what Alan was touching on, how for a long time, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs would have to go to the state legislature to get the funding that they're already supposed to receive. I believe per the constitutional mandate, the 20% public land trust proceeds ought to and need to be distributed to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And that's not even a question. That's not a matter of whether we think it's the right thing to do, whether they use it right. It's just the thing that needs to be done because that's what we already mandated through the Constitution. If we cut this out of the constitutional mandate or cut this out of the Constitution just because we don't want to fulfill it, then what's to say that we should keep anything else intact in the Constitution? Just like any other thing that's in the Constitution, we need to follow through, and the government needs to do a better job of following through and keeping its promise, especially to make sure that the Native Hawaiians can advance and continue to progress here in Hawaii and survive and make it here. OHA and DHHL has its history. We need to make sure that we can make the money go in places that really benefit the Hawaiian people. But at the same time, it's not the state legislature's job to cut funding just because we don't want to give them the money and we have better places for it to go. If elected to office, I would make sure that such a proposal as to just do our job and fund the mandate has my full support, my full backing, and I would work very, very hard to make sure this is something that comes to fruition here.
Thank you very much, Coby. Right, Flora.
The next question has to do with the public-private partnerships. What is your position on public-private partnerships in the delivery of public services, such as the Honolulu Rail and private prisons? I believe the order of the speakers is Lisa, Alan, Coby, and Scott. Lisa?
Okay, so for me, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there's always a risk of for-profit companies exploiting government for-profit. They have a conflict of interest. So wherever possible, I prefer services that are using government funds to be delivered by government agencies or in collaboration with local nonprofit organizations. That provides local permanent jobs rather than sending our dollars out of the state to outside contractors and consultants. My experience with the Department of Health, DLNR, and the Division of Urban Forestry is that state employees are very hardworking and professional. However, wages are often too low to compete with the private sector, and there are positions that just remain vacant, and then the work is contracted out at a higher cost in the end to the private sector. There are some projects that require specialized technology, and we have to contract them out or create a public-private partnership. And an example of that is the rail that you brought up, and that hasn't really worked out for us very well. On principle, I oppose all private prisons. They are, often have terrible conditions. And they actually lobby as an industry to keep the flow of incarcerated people coming so they can have more business. I just saw a documentary called 13th, which explained the history really well that I would recommend. But so my feeling is that private
15.
Okay, so PPPs are useful or necessary at times, but whenever possible, I don't think they're the way to go.
Thank you, Lisa. Alan?
Thank you. As to the public-private partnerships, right now we haven't seen a major project that has worked. A lot of the examples given, Melodie, is the rail and private prisons. Those are things in which are critical to our infrastructure, to our way of life, transportation, and the Department of Public Safety. Now, I work and I've spoken and I've represented clients that are at Saguaro, Arizona prison. And you know what's the sad thing though? As far as we know, hey, you know, private prisons are bad. They are, because we know that it's for profit and that they'd rather have a pipeline that's consistent because they make money off of each person that is in their custody, instead of the Department of Public Safety being able to handle that responsibility themselves. But on the back end of that, you know what's surprising to hear? Well, OCCC and Halava and other facilities, well, they're not up to par. And I've had clients tell me that there's more programs and there's more support for job retraining and social services at Saguaro. And that's the sad thing, is that they're torn between being somewhere where they're not a statistic and a dollar sign and actually getting the support they need. So pulling back to what a public-private partnership should mean, it should be for services that are going to be cost-effective and aren't critical. It can succeed in those areas, but when primary and large functions of government use is being diverted to private entities that are running these projects for profit, you know, we're not going to get, and we're not going to be confident in the work product that we have. So in general, I think they can work,
15.
but we don't have a history of success there. And until we do, I don't think we really should be investing in large projects through the public-private partnership route. The state should be paying for those critical things. Thank you.
Mahalo. Coby?
So I believe public-private partnerships can be beneficial relationships where both parties can create a service which is supplied at a reduced cost to our taxpayers. The optimal relationship is one where the business takes on some of the financial risk of the project, which incentivizes that the project runs smoothly and is profitable. And not to say that oversight isn't needed. We definitely need oversight, but this is potential for this type of partnership. This benefits the taxpayer as they're not left taking all of the financial risk, with an open check for how much the project can cost. The Honolulu Rail is a prominent example of this, which is why a private-public partnership is now being explored for the last segment, not all that successfully, but it is being explored. And, you know, as the HDE President Randy Pereira says, it's not something that can fit all cases, but there is a place for it. These kind of relationships can also revolutionize how projects are done and completed in Hawaii, where they start and end on budget, as well as on time. Additionally, it can cut costs and create new revenue opportunities through these partnerships. UHERO, the University of Hawaii's economic research organization, believes that it'll go a long way in helping to resolve the issue of unfunded liabilities in our state, where over the following 30 years, 88 billion is the current estimated on liabilities for the state and local governments in infrastructure, pensions, and climate change that hasn't been addressed adequately or for the past 30 years. And while this isn't the catch-all, end-all solution to addressing unfunded liabilities, public-private partnerships are certainly a part of the answer, and I'd explore them as an option in future delivery of future public service projects. Thank you.
Scott, thank you.
I oppose public-private partnerships when they're used to outsource jobs that should be done by public servants or to enrich well-connected cronies. The two examples in this question are particularly egregious. Rail was a boondoggle. It was never going to cost $5.3 billion, and it won't cost the $9 billion it's projected to cost now. And private prisons just shouldn't exist. They create financial incentives to lock up more of our brothers and sisters. And we all know that burden will fall heavier on people of color. Public-private partnerships that go wrong undermine confidence in government, which is at an all-time low in Kailua and Waimanalo, based on the people I've talked to. However, I do think that there's a place for public-private partnerships when labor standards are met and public money is guarded. For instance, I'm happy for the state to give money to the Aloha United Way that it can spend on keeping people in their houses. I'm happy for the state to hire contractors to build affordable housing on state lands. I'm happy for the federal government to give money to pharmaceutical companies to produce a COVID-19 vaccine. My test for public-private partnerships when I'm in office will be, is there a transparent bidding process? Is there a compelling reason to involve the private sector? Will there be adequate oversight? And are workers protected?
Thank you, Scott. We need to move to closing statements now. Lisa, Scott, Coby, and Alan. Lisa? Lisa? You're unmuted.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to close saying that, I have a perspective that's a little different than the other candidates just due to my age, having seen Kailua and Waimanalo change over the last several decades. And some of the changes are okay, but I think a lot of us feel that we would like to preserve what we can. And I have worked to help us deal with some of the changes, the over-tourism, trying to protect our beach parks and our neighborhoods from the tour companies and the kayak companies, trying to restrain the number of vacation rentals in our neighborhoods competing for housing. And then I have also been involved with our healthcare in our state, education, and conservation. So you know where I stand. I've already been working on these issues. I'll keep working on them. It's not something that I'm just saying because I think I might start working on it if I get elected, right? Those are my values and those are things I'll work on. I'm now very engaged in the homeless community because that is another thing that I'd like to work on that I didn't have much experience. So I'm learning as I go now. So anyways, I hope that I get the opportunity to serve you folks. I have helped write bills and support them through the legislature. I understand the process. I know people. So anyways, I hope I have the opportunity to work for this community in a new way. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Scott, it's your turn.
Thank you, Melodie, Flora, and Jeff for hosting today. Thank you, Lisa, Coby, and Alan for bringing your ideas tonight. And good luck with the rest of the campaign. And most of all, thanks to the voters who tuned in tonight. It's your vote next month that will decide our Democratic nominee. The theme of my campaign is Scott Grimmer walks the walk. The theme is not about the fact that I've already walked over 600 miles in the district during this campaign and that I'll hit 1,000 by primary day. Walking the walk is actually about campaigning in a way that aligns with my values and legislating in the way that I campaign. For instance, I believe, like I think all the candidates believe, that special interests pump too much money into campaigns and get too much sway when it's time to write laws. But I am the only candidate who agreed to limit spending on this campaign to $22,800 and accept public funding. I believe, like I think all the candidates believe, that a lack of affordable housing is increasing our houseless population and forcing our young people to move to the mainland. But I'm the only candidate who supported the affordable housing project in Kailua. I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk. When it comes to the biggest issue of this campaign, getting Hawaii back to work, I'll walk the walk too. I'll take my experience creating 21st century jobs to the capital, where I will help create the high-paying jobs Hawaii needs to recover economically without going back to our abusive relationship with tourism. There were so many issues we didn't cover tonight. If you want to know where I stand on anything, text me, 808-206-2304, or contact me through my website, scottgrimmer.com. I've already met a lot of the voters out there, and I hope to meet many more before the ballots arrive. Thanks for having me.
Coby.
So I believe in a democracy, and I believe that we have the capacity for change to happen starting at the ballot box. And that's why it's something so great that we have here in the United States. These very issues which we've learned about and heard about are quite nuanced and complex. And these are issues that cannot be fought alone. That's why we're all here today speaking to our constituents about how we best seek to serve them. But I'm also here to extend a hand because I truly believe that Hawaii where these issues no longer persist is possible. Together, we can build those houses and end homelessness and take care of our families that are on the streets. Together, we can clean up our Aina and give it the love and that really hasn't seen. The overdevelopment, fossil fuels, and poor environmental policies just haven't taken care of it. Together, we can keep our Ohana safe by following social distancing and supporting vital health services in a cohesive effort of reversing the negative impacts of COVID-19. Together, we can work on writing legislation where I bring your voices and opinions to the Hawaii State Legislature, empowering communities and invoking the true economic revolutionary change that people deserve. This is what I seek to do for my community and with my community, so that we and our keiki have a bright and better future ahead of us. Once again, deep mahalo to Melodie, Flora, and Jeff for bringing this wonderful event together. Mahalo to all the other candidates as we all pursue this role to serve our community. Lastly, a warm mahalo to all the viewers for coming and listening to how we all seek to serve Hawaii and this community especially. And I hope that we can work together at the end of this on bringing all of our voices and your voices to the state legislature. If you have any questions or want to find out about more how you can visit or how you can learn more about my campaign, please visit my website at cobychock or cobychock.com. We also have contact info, email, that you can also feel free to contact me with any further questions. Mahalo, everyone, and have a great night.
Mahalo, Coby. Alan.
All right. First thing I want to do is mahalo, Melodie, Jeff, Joe, Flora, everyone involved. You know, I could tell you a little bit more about myself and why I believe I'm the candidate you should vote for. But my candidacy is not about me, it's about our community. So I open the door always to the other candidates, and they're candidates. People ask me, what's your take on your opponents? They're not opponents, they're other candidates just looking to serve our community. So win or lose, I'd hope to collaborate with Coby, Lisa, and Scott, as well as our candidates in the other races, right? It's about collaboration, it's about unity, but I do believe I bring a great perspective, but not just perspective, but experience and some expertise in some areas that some of the other candidates might not have. That's one is the legislature, and two is my legal background as a practicing attorney. But I don't want to just be pigeonholed as I'm a public school grad, I'm a Hawaiian, I'm a lawyer. Again, it's about representation for our community. It's Kailua and Waimanalo, and can I be the person that best represents that very complicated and layered community or two communities? And I think I can do that. You know, one thing I just want to bring up was, I brought it up the other day in another forum, was there's a committee in the State House called Water, Land, and Hawaiian Affairs. And do you know how many Hawaiians sit on that committee? 0, right? So I want to give people a perspective. I don't want you to vote for me because I'm Hawaiian and that I just want that representation. I want you to look into candidates that can be great allies, but also let the leadership and the voices be lifted from the community. And community leaders collaborate. Community leaders lead from the front and from the back and from within, right? It's not just I have all the answers. If I said that, that would be disingenuous. You know, Lisa has a great background on public health policy and environmentalism. Coby has fresh perspectives, and Scott has business expertise. I don't have those things, but what I do bring to the table is passion, legal expertise, and experience in the legislature, as well as my community role. So I just want to thank everyone tonight for engaging with me. You can find me at alanakao.com, or you can call me at 808-454-3511. And please do, let's connect and let's work together. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Alan. Melodie?
Okay, right. Mahalo to all our candidates, Alan Akao, Coby Chock, Scott Grimmer, and Lisa Marten, for your time, insight, and service and dedication to our community. We wish you all the best of luck and blessings in the coming weeks ahead, and we look forward to working with you soon. And for the rest of you, please remember, if you have not already registered to vote, the last day to register is July 9th. You can register online at hawaii.vote and enroll in the Democratic Party at hawaiidemocrats.org. Mail-in ballots will be mailed on July 17th through the 21st, and August 8th is the primary election. So please make sure that you mail back your ballots early to meet that deadline. Again, mahalo for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next candidates forum. which will be on July 14th with District 48, incumbent Lisa Kitagawa and challenger Kaui Pratt Aquino. Again, mahalo nui loa and a hui ho.
Thank you very much. And mahalo to Joe Francher for being our technical running this for us. Mahalo nui loa. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks to whoever sent me that text telling me how to get the spotlight.
Listen, Jeff.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm going to stop recording now.
Yes, and we can, did you want